What if the bedrock of our understanding, the very foundation upon which we build our concepts of existence, time, and purpose, rests upon an incomplete memory? What if the most profound narrative of creation, one that attempts to answer the inescapable question of why we are here, was not a theological parable intended for moral upliftment, but rather a historical record, a bureaucratic inventory of resource allocation, divine labor, and calculated necessity? This is the unsettling invitation, extended by the dust of ancient Sumer, a civilization that arose with a startling, almost impossible speed in the Fertile Crescent, carrying with it a cosmology so detailed, so complex, and so profoundly materialist that it challenges the core tenets of modern historical thought. We are drawn back to the moment civilization began, a fleeting window in time where farming, metallurgy, writing, and intricate governance seemed to coalesce not through slow, organic evolution, but through sudden, deliberate instruction. To peel back these layers of time, we must first turn our attention to the silent witnesses, the clay tablets, scored with cuneiform script, holding the weight of millennia. Among these fragments, one text stands uniquely apart, less a mystical hymn and more an administrative decree carved into the fabric of reality. We speak of the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian epic of creation. Its name, simply meaning "when on high," signals the beginning of everything. But unlike later myths that focus on a singular, omnipotent deity forming the cosmos from nothingness, the Enuma Elish begins not in silence, but in chaos. Specifically, a chaos defined by water. It is a story not of simple divine fiat, but of struggle, generation, and violent political rearrangement among celestial beings. Consider for a moment the landscape before existence, a time when the heavens above had not yet been named and the earth below remained unformed. There existed only Apsu, the primeval sweet water, and Tiamat, the primordial salt water, their waters mingled together. They were the parents of the first generation of gods. This recognition is key. Our beginnings, according to the oldest surviving records, are rooted in strange, dualistic aquatic entities. But as these younger deities began to stir, they created noise and turbulence, upsetting the stillness of their parents. Apsu, counseled by his vizier Mumu, decreed the need for silence, a silencing that required destruction. This is where the narrative shifts from abstract cosmogony to recognizable, unsettling drama, forcing us to ask, why would the divine need to resort to regicide to achieve peace? It is here, in the conflict, that we find the first threads of unease. The god Ea, a deity often associated with wisdom, water, and creation, learned of Apsu's plan and, through a powerful spell, cast Apsu into a deep sleep, binding him and killing him. Ea then built his dwelling upon the slain Apsu, taking his mistress Damkina, and there fathering the central hero of the epic, the powerful and brilliant Marduk. Tiamat, heartbroken and furious at the death of her consort, refused to let the betrayal pass. She gathered an army, a grotesque host of 11 monsters, serpents, scorpion men, and raging demons, appointing her son Kingu as their commander, placing the tablets of destiny upon his chest, granting him authority over the fates themselves. This is not the gentle origin story we might expect. It is a tale of internal war, high-stakes politics, and the violent usurpation of power, demanding deep reflection on whether these descriptions truly represent metaphors for elemental forces, or if they describe events that possessed a concrete, tangible reality to those who inscribed them. If you are intrigued by this foundational violence that seems to underpin reality itself, take a moment now to acknowledge this journey of discovery. Your intellectual engagement is critical to unlocking these narratives. Please consider engaging with this content by liking this presentation and subscribing to ensure you do not miss the subsequent parts of this comprehensive investigation. Your continued presence and thoughtful comments are the engines of this endeavor. The stage was set for the defining conflict. The younger gods, terrified by Tiamat's monstrous forces, could not find a champion. Eventually, they turned to Marduk. Marduk agreed to fight Tiamat, but only under one condition, that upon victory, he would be granted supreme authority over the universe. It was an audacious demand, cementing the idea that creation was fundamentally a political transaction. Armed with the divine winds, the storm, and his formidable bow, Marduk met Tiamat in the great celestial battle. He slew her, splitting her vast body in two, like a massive shell. From one half, he fashioned the canopy of the heavens. From the other, the foundational earth. He organized the cosmos, establishing the stations for the great gods, creating the calendar, and setting the moon and stars in their respective courses. This act of cosmological architecture is where the story shifts dramatically from the formation of the universe to the needs of the newly established divine administration. Marduk, now supreme ruler, turned his attention to Tiamat's general, Kingu. He captured him and seized the tablets of destiny. The gods, now victorious but exhausted, gathered before Marduk, celebrating their liberation. But a crucial problem remained. The universe, now organized, required maintenance. The Anunnaki, a name that resonates through the ages, meaning simply, those who from heaven to earth came, were exhausted by their own labors. They required rest. This pivotal moment introduces the essential mystery of the Sumerian accounts. Why do gods need rest? Why do these supreme beings, masters of creation, require relief from physical, strenuous toil? Their frustration led them to protest to Marduk's father, Ea. The text specifies the need for a solution, a servant class. The purpose was clear, to relieve the divine beings of their burden. The focus was gold, or perhaps other precious resources vital for the operations of the Anunnaki on Earth. Substances they had traveled far to obtain, and which required immense effort to mine and transport. The solution Marduk proposed was to create a new creature, Lulu, the primitive worker, designed specifically to take over the yoke of labor. But the creation process was peculiar. It required a sacrifice. They chose Kingu, Tiamat's fallen general, the deity who had incited the conflict. Kingu was put to death, and his blood was mixed with the clay of the earth. This fusion, divine essence, the blood of a god, mixed with terrestrial matter, clay, is the foundation of human existence according to the oldest records available. Humanity, or the Adamu, the term often used for this created working-class entity, was not an afterthought, nor a creature born of spontaneous love, but an intentional hybrid designed for a singular, functional purpose: servitude. We are essentially a planned architecture, an engineered solution to a resource problem faced by celestial visitors. This realization carries a heavy, almost unbearable weight. It implies that our deep-seated, restless compulsion toward work, production, and hierarchy might not be a modern societal construct, but a programming derived from our very genesis. If you find the cold, deliberate engineering of humanity unnerving, take a moment to consider the gravity of this implication. Yet this knowledge, detailed, specific, and foundational, did not endure in the general consciousness. Why? Throughout history, great civilizations rise and fall, and with each cataclysm, whether flood, war, or drought, layers of memory are stripped away. What was once common knowledge, that we were genetically tailored to fulfill a task, became myth, then metaphor, and finally, esoteric legend. The true message of the Anunnaki and the Enuma Elish was buried not just under physical sand, but under conceptual forgetting. But the knowledge, like a faint, persistent signal transmitted across vast emptiness, has a cyclical nature. It waits for moments in time when human curiosity becomes sufficiently developed, when technology allows us to re-examine the physical evidence, and when we are willing to question the standard narratives of evolutionary ascent. The enduring tablets speak of cycles of return, of great observers who descend, establish, retreat, and promise a return when the celestial alignments or terrestrial conditions are met. Our ancestors were taught to look up, recognizing that their heritage lay not in the slow crawl from the primordial soup, but in the calculated intervention from the stars. These ancient records force us to confront the possibility that we are not the pinnacle of self-driven evolution, but rather the highly successful, albeit problematic result of an external project. The deeper we dig into the material requirements of the Anunnaki, their need for gold, their extensive infrastructure, their highly stratified society, the more the narrative feels less like theology and more like a detailed report on colonial resource management. This foundational segment of the Enuma Elish is merely the threshold. If we accept the premise that our creation was an architectural solution to a divine labor dispute, then the subsequent history of mankind, the rapid development of metallurgy, astronomy, and sophisticated law, must be viewed through a new, deeply unsettling lens. Were these advancements self-generated, or were they the remnants of training provided by those who engineered us? The evidence suggests a pattern of sudden instruction, often tied to figures who were not of this earth, observers who watched the progress of their experiment. This pattern is essential to understanding the later conflict and the ultimate decision made by the chief Anunnaki regarding the fate of the created Lulu. The relationship between the masters and the workers, established in violence and necessity, was destined to evolve into betrayal and catastrophe. If you have stayed with us this far, contemplating the unsettling idea that our purpose may be encoded into our physical being by external forces, then you understand the weight of this investigation. This is not simply storytelling. It is a deep dive into the coded history of civilization. If you feel compelled to join this journey of discovery, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. To mark your commitment to seeking the deeper truth, please comment below using the specific phrase, "The signal has returned." In our next part, we will move beyond the creation myth to explore the actual societal structure and the detailed activities of the Anunnaki on Earth, uncovering their explicit need for specific resources and the infrastructure they built to obtain them, beginning the crucial examination of the city of Eridu, the first settlement established by these celestial visitors. The search for the missing pieces of our legacy continues. Is it possible that the deepest truths about our origin are not preserved in sacred texts meant for worship, but rather hidden within administrative records disguised as mythology? This is the unsettling question that hangs over the fragmented clay tablets of Sumer, the cradle of civilization, where the epic Enuma Elish meticulously outlines a creation process that feels less like a miracle and more like an extremely violent systematic engineering project. We left off at the threshold of existence, staring into the primordial deep, where only Apsu, the sweet water, and Tiamat, the chaotic salt water, mingled without form. The tablets tell us that for an incomprehensible duration, there was only silence, a vast, featureless expanse that precedes all consciousness. But silence, in the Sumerian cosmic view, was not peace. It was merely antecedent chaos waiting for the spark of agitation. And that agitation came not from a singular, benevolent creator, but from the simple, yet profound act of multiplication. The birth of the younger gods, Lamu and Lahamu, Anshar and Kishar, and then the restless generation that included Ea, Enki, shattered the stillness. This is where the narrative shifts from cosmic philosophy to existential conflict. Apsu, the paternal deep, began to resent the noise, the motion, the sheer busyness of his progeny. This dissonance is critical. It suggests that the primary state of the universe was intended to be static, silent, and potentially devoid of complex life. The younger gods, our immediate predecessors in the divine lineage, were disruptive innovators, fundamentally at odds with the status quo established by their cosmic progenitors. If we pause here and genuinely absorb the weight of this initial conflict, we realize we are not dealing with allegories of good versus evil, but rather a clash of existential imperatives. Apsu wanted to impose stillness, a kind of eternal sleep, upon the universe. The younger gods, particularly Ea, who was often equated with deep wisdom and strategic cunning, insisted on expansion and activity. When Apsu plotted their destruction, Ea intervened, striking Apsu down and imprisoning him. This act is the first divine regicide, the necessary violence required to move from unformed potential into active creation. But what does it mean that the foundation of our world is built upon a crime against the primal father? It establishes a pattern of revolutionary action, a cyclical necessity for overthrowing the established order to facilitate new forms of existence. This deep resonance with revolution and necessary conflict is one of the crucial features of the Enuma Elish, distinguishing it sharply from later, more monotheistic creation narratives. If these whispers resonate with you, if the implication of ancient forgotten cycles stirs your curiosity, take a moment now to reflect on this. Understanding the roots of this cosmic drama is essential for grasping the subsequent actions of the Anunnaki. Considering the magnitude of this foundational violence, take a moment to subscribe and signal your commitment to this deeper investigation, ensuring that this trail of lost knowledge is not ignored. The conflict then escalates, focusing on Tiamat. Tiamat, the saltwater chaos, initially hesitated to avenge Apsu, her consort, but persuaded by the younger gods' continued noise and disruption, she mobilized. Tiamat is often depicted as a monstrous dragon, the embodiment of primordial chaos, but the Sumerian understanding of her is far more complex. She is the abyss, the Abzu itself, the fertile mother who generated the cosmic substance. When she prepares for battle, she creates 11 types of terrifying creatures, monstrous hybrids designed for war, placing her son Kingu at the head of her host, entrusting him with the tablets of destiny, tablets that contained the very laws and algorithms of the universe. This suggests that Tiamat, while representing chaos to the new order, held legitimate foundational power, the blueprints of reality itself. This confrontation terrified the younger pantheon. Only Marduk, the most capable and charismatic of the new generation, dared to face Tiamat. His ascension to power is conditional. He must defeat Tiamat, and in exchange, he will be granted absolute sovereignty over the gods. This negotiation, detailed in the epic, transforms Marduk from a capable deity into the undisputed sovereign, the architect of the new celestial order. The defeat of Tiamat is the central, bloody, and most physically descriptive act of the entire creation myth. Marduk slays the cosmic mother, splitting her vast body in two. This surgical division, described with meticulous detail on the tablets, is the moment earth and sky are formed. Her upper half becomes the heavens, the firmament, designed to hold back her chaotic waters. Her lower half becomes the earth, the foundation upon which Sumer would one day rise. The oceans are Tiamat's tears, the mountains her ridges. The implication here is staggering. The very structure of our physical reality is the result of divine dismemberment. This is not creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. This is creation through forced transformation of existing organic matter. Our world is literally constructed from the remains of a defeated cosmic being. If the earth is Tiamat's body, then the rules of physics, astronomy, and even genetics are embedded in this foundational structure, the deep code held within her matter. This surgical act of forming the cosmos through violence sets the stage for the physical arrival of the Anunnaki. Once the cosmic architecture is established, the victorious deities must now manage their new kingdom. But governing proved tiresome. The victorious gods, the Anunnaki, a term meaning princely offspring, or those who from heaven to earth came, were now tasked with the heavy labor of maintaining the cosmos that Marduk had structured. They had to build and maintain the dwelling places of the gods, dig canals, and ensure the functioning of the newly created order. These are tasks that require immense, sustained physical effort, far exceeding what one might expect of purely spiritual, ethereal beings. Why did these princely offspring, these high gods who defeated Tiamat, require labor? This is the missing ingredient in nearly all interpretations of the Enuma Elish, until we consider the tablets not as theology, but as a record of operational command structure. The Anunnaki were fundamentally observers, not fully terrestrial. They were responsible for maintaining the cycles, particularly the long celestial counts that dictated their schedule of arrival and departure, the Sothic and precessional cycles deeply encoded in Sumerian astronomy. Their primary concern was not human worship, but infrastructure maintenance, a necessity perhaps tied to their reliance on specific terrestrial resources or gravitational harmonics. The narrative now shifts dramatically from the high drama of cosmic conflict to the mundane, exhausting reality of labor. And this is where the system begins to fray. The sheer burden of the work caused immense dissatisfaction among the Anunnaki. They became weary, frustrated, and began to question the rigid authority of Marduk and the council. The text depicts a full-scale mutiny, a work stoppage, a rebellion against the divine hierarchy. This revolt is the pivotal moment that introduces humanity into the divine schema. If the Anunnaki were weary of digging, mining, and building, a substitute workforce was needed. And who better to create a workforce than Ea, Enki, the god of wisdom, strategy, and biological manipulation, who had already displayed his cunning by assassinating Apsu. The decision to create Lulu, the first man, the laborer, is an answer to an industrial problem, not a theological yearning for fellowship. The creation of mankind is detailed as a pragmatic, necessary solution to a labor shortage crisis within the Anunnaki hierarchy. But to create man, a sacrifice was needed. Just as Tiamat's body was used to form the earth, the blood and bone of one of the defeated leaders, Kingu, who held the tablets of destiny, was used to bind the physical essence of the Anunnaki with the crude terrestrial clay. This act is the ultimate revelation. We, humanity, are the inheritors of the physical essence of the divine, mixed with the matter of the earth. We carry the burden of this mixed heritage, the desire for freedom and the compulsion to labor, encoded in our very DNA. This makes us, essentially, hybrid creations, designed for a specific task, yet carrying the rebellious seed of the defeated cosmic commander. For millennia, this story served as the foundation of Sumerian law and social order. Every canal dug, every brick laid, was a continuation of the divine mandate to serve the Anunnaki. Our historical amnesia regarding these ancient documents allows us to forget this vital context. We see myths of creation. They saw operational history, the sophisticated knowledge in Sumer, the mathematics, the complex irrigation systems, the precise understanding of stellar movements, was not homegrown over slow centuries, but seemed to emerge fully formed, a sudden burst of brilliance. Could this knowledge explosion be the tangible evidence of the Anunnaki's inheritance? The tools left behind by the high-tech observers who oversaw their labor project? This suggests that these gods were not just spiritual entities, but engineers whose cyclical return was tied to the celestial rhythm. The cycle of return, the signal awaited in the heavens, remains a deep, quiet undercurrent in the study of lost civilizations. What did the Anunnaki promise the newly created labor force? Perhaps not eternal paradise, but freedom from the immediate burden of their presence, provided the work continued. Our enduring human impulse toward building monumental structures, our obsession with systems and order, could be seen as a residual instinct implanted during our creation. The signal they left behind, deeply inscribed in the foundational narrative of the Enuma Elish, is the promise of their eventual return to inspect the results. The tablets do not end with humanity achieving godhood. They end with the establishment of a rigorous system, waiting for the supervisors to check their work. If you have stayed with us, journeying through the cosmic dismemberment and the unsettling implication that human existence is rooted in a divine labor dispute, then you recognize the profound stakes of this investigation. This is where the historical record meets the deep memory of the species. To truly understand the Anunnaki and their role in creation, we must next examine the details of the revolt itself, the moment the lower-tier gods, the Igigi, threw down their tools and demanded relief. This act of protest led directly to the biological creation of humanity, a topic that deserves our full, focused attention in the next segment. This complex tapestry of revolution, engineering, and destiny is only beginning to reveal itself. If you've absorbed the weight of the Enuma Elish and the unsettling history of the Anunnaki, show your support for deep investigative documentary work by liking this video now. Please subscribe to ensure you don't miss the next critical part of this 8-part series, where we examine the hierarchy and the rebellion of the Igigi. If you feel the weight of this ancient inheritance, comment below using the phrase, "The Anunnaki's labor." Join the community of those who dare to look beyond the surface of history. We will continue this descent into the foundations of Sumerian creation, waiting for that unspoken signal. The journey continues. Did the primeval chaos described so dramatically in the Enuma Elish truly dissipate when Marduk, the champion of the younger gods, cleaved Tiamat in two? Or was that act merely the substitution of one kind of disorder for a more subtle, perhaps more enduring one? When we examine the ancient tablets of Sumer, seeking the foundational truth of the Anunnaki and their earthly sojourn, we are often too quick to accept the climax of the creation myth as an endpoint. We see the cosmic battle settled, the heavens established from Tiamat's carcass, and humanity fashioned from the blood of the rebellious god king. Yet a disquieting weight settles upon the researcher who spends too long tracing the cuneiform lines, a feeling that the silence, after the storm, holds more profound implications than the storm itself. It is here, in the unsettling quiet following the divine reorganization, that the true mandate of the Anunnaki begins to reveal its mechanical, almost surgical nature. The conflict between the generations of gods, between Apsu, Tiamat, and their rebellious offspring, leading eventually to Enlil and Marduk, might be less a morality play and more a record of chronological dislocation, a necessary political upheaval to restructure a project that had gone astray. If the Enuma Elish is the official governmental history, meticulously carved to legitimize the new ruling structure under Marduk, then what were the minutes of the meetings held immediately after the treaty? The texts suggest that the Anunnaki, having secured their dominance, were then faced with a dilemma that was less spiritual and more logistical: the sheer, backbreaking labor required to maintain their new cosmic order. The initial purpose of their descent, the Ki-Ga-Ra, or establishing of the place on Earth, demanded resources. We are not speaking of symbolic offerings. We are speaking of minerals, metals, and infrastructure. It is here that curiosity curdles into a profound sense of strangeness. These beings, often described as luminous and possessing knowledge far exceeding anything known to humanity for millennia, appear to be burdened by toil. They are miners, builders, and maintainers of systems. Why would such advanced entities, capable of cosmic manipulation and the charting of deep space, be forced into physical, repetitive drudgery? This paradox suggests that their technology, while immense, was either dependent upon specific terrestrial components, or that the required labor was not simply about acquiring gold, but about something far more esoteric, perhaps the creation of a resonant frequency, or the preparation of a massive celestial staging ground. As we move deeper into the recognition phase of this investigation, the pattern becomes clear. The Sumerian accounts do not describe whimsical deities demanding worship. They detail demanding overseers assigning quotas. The constant complaint among the lower-ranking Anunnaki, the Igigi, documented in fragmented texts, reveals an internal revolt prompted not by philosophical differences, but by exhaustion. This is the moment when the narrative pivots from myth to potential political history, detailing a resource crisis among extraterrestrial visitors. It is an unnerving recognition to realize that the fundamental structure of our existence, a life defined by labor and debt, may have been codified in response to a celestial labor dispute. If this deep dive into the foundations of Sumerian record-keeping holds your attention, if the connection between cosmic warfare and earthly mining schedules ignites a realization that our historical timelines may be fundamentally flawed, then I encourage you to pause, internalize this profound shift in perspective, and share your immediate reflections in the comments below. Use a single phrase, perhaps the inheritance of labor, to mark your place in this ongoing discovery. Your engagement, your thoughtful consideration of these ancient echoes is vital to deciphering the full scope of the Anunnaki presence and the true nature of the creation described in the Enuma Elish. This is not merely history, it is an active participation in unlocking a shared, forgotten past. Subscribe if you have not already to ensure you receive the next crucial part of this investigation as soon as it is brought forward. The solution to the divine logistical crisis, of course, was the creation of the Lulu Amalu, or primitive worker. But this revelation brings with it an even deeper sense of intellectual unease. The texts detail a sophisticated process involving the genetic manipulation of existing hominids, the fusion of divine essence with terrestrial matter, shaped in the Bit-Shimti, the house where the fates are determined. We must ask, with chilling clarity, if the Anunnaki possessed the technology to create life ex nihilo, why did they require the assistance of existing terrestrial DNA? The choice implies an essential, non-replicable component already present on Earth, something that anchored the creation to this planet, perhaps ensuring its stability or its capacity to interact with the environment needed for the resource extraction. It is less a creation and more a modification, a strategic hybridization designed for maximum compliance and durability. This process of selective adaptation suggests a knowledge base so extensive it challenges our current definitions of biological science and engineering. This is the gradual revelation of a terrifying efficiency. The Anunnaki did not make us in their image out of vanity, but out of necessity, optimizing a biological machine perfectly suited for the intended task. The unsettling mathematics of this divine genealogy suggests a cold, precise calculus of purpose. Every feature of early humanity, from our endurance to our short lifespan, preventing intellectual rebellion across vast generations, was potentially a parameter in their grand, cyclical equation. We begin tracing the echoes of the Anunnaki's descent, recognizing that their departure, or assumed departure, did not signify the end of the project. If their civilization required gold, not just as ornamentation, but perhaps as a component in massive atmospheric shielding or as fuel for long-distance communication, as some researchers hypothesize, then the system they established had to be self-sustaining, capable of running in their absence. This leads us to the persistent whispered concepts of the observers, a subclass of Anunnaki, or perhaps hybrid individuals, tasked with maintaining the output and monitoring the development of the primitive workers. These observers would become the source of later mythologies concerning giant beings or teachers who arrived during the nascent stages of civilization. They were the inheritors of the earthly operation, the ones left to manage the massive undertaking until the next return cycle. This paradox of wisdom and brutality within the Sumerian pantheon is perhaps the most difficult concept to reconcile. These beings gave us the foundations of mathematics, astronomy, law, and agriculture, the very bedrock of civilization. They gifted us the ability to record our own history. But these gifts were not philanthropic. They were operational tools. They taught us to count, to measure the yield, to chart the stars to understand their own orbital return schedule, and to write laws to ensure social cohesion and continuous productivity. The wisdom was the manual for the machine they had created. The brutality was reserved for any failure to adhere to the maintenance schedule. It is an industrial model of divine interaction, cold and profoundly alien in its objective focus. The great work, therefore, was not the creation of mankind, but the establishment of a planetary mining colony designed to function for extraordinary lengths of time. This introduces the concept of deep time, the vast gulfs of celestial mechanics that dictate the rhythm of the Anunnaki presence. The Sumerian preoccupation with astronomical cycles, particularly the concept of the Sar, a period approximately equal to 3,600 Earth years, suggests a profound awareness of a timeline far exceeding human memory. These cycles were not just religious holidays, they were operational deadlines. The construction of massive ziggurats and the sudden explosive growth of urban centers were perhaps markers, terrestrial signals visible from space, indicating readiness for inspection or resupply. The mechanism of the observer class implies that the Earth was never truly abandoned. The texts speak of those who kept watch from high places, those whose lineage intermingled with early human royalty, ensuring that the operational knowledge, the inheritance, was never completely lost. They were the cultural custodians, silently guiding development along predetermined lines, perhaps waiting for a signal, the moment of the celestial alignment that marks the Anunnaki's return. This framework challenges the traditional view of forgotten civilizations being wiped out by cataclysm. Perhaps they were simply decommissioned, their utility exhausted, their purpose superseded by a new, more efficient model of control. This brings us to the core mystery of the missing pieces in the tablets, the incomplete blueprint. The narrative often cuts off or becomes highly allegorical just when the technical details become too revealing. It is as if the scribes, writing under divine supervision, reached a security clearance threshold. The full details of the Anunnaki's true origin, the complete physics of their propulsion systems, and the ultimate destination of the gathered resources remain encoded, hidden, or strategically omitted. We are left with the architectural plans for the nursery and the mining site, but never the coordinates for the main base of operations. The investigation demands continuity, demanding that we push past the comfort of settled mythology into the hard, sharp edges of operational reality. If you have stayed with us through this deep dive into the unsettling realization that the Enuma Elish might be far more than just a myth, if you feel the same intellectual current pulling you toward these forgotten truths, then you are truly part of the few dedicated to understanding our ancient heritage. To continue unraveling this complex tapestry of the Anunnaki, the cycles of return, and the mechanism of the observers, it is vital that you join this community of investigation. Please ensure you are subscribed to the channel and give this video a like so that the algorithmic signal recognizes the importance of this work. For our records, and to mark your commitment to the next stage of this journey, comment the specific phrase, the chronological dislocation. This signals your readiness for the next installment, where we will examine the physical evidence of these alleged mining operations and the deliberate engineering behind the civilizations that mysteriously disappeared. The story does not conclude here. It only deepens, preparing us for the next dramatic revelation. Did the universe truly begin with a deafening roar? Or was the initial act of creation merely a painful sigh, a low-frequency vibration felt by those ancient consciousnesses that we call the Anunnaki? We have navigated the turbulent waters of the Enuma Elish, witnessing the primordial clash where Tiamat, the chaotic salt sea, was brutally fragmented, her remains repurposed by the ascending deity Marduk. Yet the sheer unimaginable scale of this mythological violence, the cleaving of a cosmic entity to form the heavens and the earth, begs a more profound question than just how or who. The question that lingers in the silence between the cuneiform tablets is, why was this destruction necessary? Why did the older generation of gods, led by Apsu and Tiamat, feel such a relentless antipathy toward the rising generation, embodied by the planning and organization of Ea and the military might of Marduk? This lingering antagonism, this familial warfare played out on a cosmic stage, suggests that the universe, as known to the Sumerians, was not born of harmonious design, but forged in necessary conflict. The myth implies an inherited trauma, a generational split between primal chaos and calculating order. The Anunnaki, the 50 great gods who followed Marduk, were the beneficiaries of this new order, but also its enforcers, burdened by the immense logistical undertaking of maintaining a cosmos constructed from the wreckage of a previous entity. Their task was not merely to rule, it was to build. And as we delve deeper into this narrative, the true weight of that mandate, the creation of order from pure, untamed chaos, begins to reveal itself as the central driving force behind everything that followed, including, critically, the arrival of humanity itself. The architects of this new reality were exhausted by the sheer scale of their inherited duties, a weariness that permeates the later stanzas of the epic, transitioning from hymns of victory to petitions for relief. This strange pivot, from cosmic conquest to celestial fatigue, is where the story of the Anunnaki truly takes on its unsettling quality, demanding our sustained attention, compelling us to sit with the ambiguity of their existence. If you feel that familiar stirring of unease, that sense that the foundational myths of human existence hide more than they reveal, then you are beginning to perceive the true depth of this ancient legacy. To truly grasp the gravity of the Anunnaki narrative, we must allow the echoes of Sumer to settle deep within our conscious reflection. The silence that followed Tiamat's demise was not one of peace, but one of administrative exhaustion. The gods, now charged with establishing the celestial spheres, setting the seasons, and defining the boundaries between En, heaven, and Ki, earth, were forced into labor of an unprecedented magnitude. The Enuma Elish suddenly shifts focus, moving from grand cosmic physics to the mundane, backbreaking work of maintaining infrastructure. It is here, in this moment of divine organizational strain, that we first detect the true strangeness of their presence. They were powerful, yes, but not omnipotent. They suffered. They complained. They were susceptible to the same kind of physical and emotional fatigue that defines our own fragile existence. We see them, the Magnificent 50, digging ditches and moving earth, a concept that immediately forces us to reconsider the entire definition of godhood in the Sumerian context. Were they deities in the purely spiritual sense, or simply an immensely advanced, long-lived civilization placed in charge of a challenging, newly formed planetary system? The text is explicit. The Anunnaki, exhausted by 40 periods of relentless work, often interpreted as 40 sars or immensely long cycles, finally revolted. They gathered in rebellion, setting fire to their tools and demanding release from their grueling tasks. This is the ultimate recognition of their nature. They were managers, engineers, perhaps even colonizers, facing a labor crisis of epic proportions. The conflict of the gods was solved, not by further battle, but by a chillingly pragmatic act of genetic and material engineering. Recognizing the desperate need for a permanent workforce to shoulder the burden of resource extraction and maintenance, specifically, the cultivation of the fields of the gods, the provision of their food, and the mining of precious, often unspecified materials, the solution proposed by Ea was revolutionary and deeply disturbing. It was the creation of a substitute worker, a primal man known as the Lulu. The concept was simple: to create a being who would take upon itself the toil of the gods, freeing the Anunnaki to return to their positions of pure supervision and command. This decision was not motivated by divine love or spiritual aspiration. It was driven by pure industrial necessity. But what was the raw material for this new creation? The myth demands that the Lulu be given the blood and essence of a god. The chosen sacrifice was King, the deity who had been Tiamat's consort and commander of her forces, captured and held responsible for the rebellion. This blending of divine essence, the very blood of a defeated and rebellious god, with the mundane clay of the earth, is a moment of profound significance. It suggests that humanity carries within its very genetic makeup the seeds of conflict and rebellion inherited directly from Kingu. We are the synthesis of order, the clay molded by the Anunnaki, and chaos, the essence of King. This uncanny mirror of clay reflects our own internal struggles, our capacity for both construction and self-destruction. We are, by our very design, beings created for purpose, but carrying a flawed, powerful, and unruly heritage. This act of creation, meticulously detailed in the later tablets of the cycle, was not merely an act of forming life. It was the imposition of a highly specific structure of servitude. The first function of humanity was work. The second was service. We were brought forth not as spiritual equals, but as designated bearers of the yoke. The Anunnaki became the overseers, the observers, watching their creation fulfill the tasks they themselves had found too burdensome. This profound realization that our earliest ancestors believed they were created solely as servants to a higher, tangible class of beings changes the entire context of human history. It implies that perhaps the foundational narrative of civilization is not one of slow, organic evolution toward independence, but the result of a sudden, engineered intervention designed to solve a divine labor shortage. And if we accept the text's assertion of this engineered purpose, we must then ask about the nature of the engineers themselves. The Anunnaki, having established the celestial order and created the workforce, became the silent sign of the observer. Were they truly gone when the myths faded? Or did they simply retreat to a less demanding sphere of existence, maintaining a watchful distance, ensuring that the elaborate machinery they constructed, the earth, the seasons, the human civilization, continued to function according to the pre-established parameters? The Sumerians, with their advanced astronomical knowledge, plotted the movements of the sky with meticulous precision, seemingly charting not just random stellar events, but predicting cyclical returns, the return of planetary bodies, or perhaps the return of their patrons. These celestial cycles, the great year, the precession of the equinoxes, were not merely abstract calendar markers. They were interwoven with their mythological and agricultural calendars, suggesting a deep-seated belief in vast, repetitive epochs where certain forces wax and wane. The structure they built was designed to last, perhaps enduring cycles far beyond human comprehension. The key, the earth, became the field of operation, meticulously organized and managed. Yet underneath the key, the Sumerians spoke of the Abzu, the freshwater deeps, the domain of Ea before Marduk's ascension. This concept of the Abzu is crucial, representing not only a hydrological reality, but a mythological repository of deep, hidden knowledge, the location of the original plans, the forgotten blueprints. Whispers from the depths suggest that even if the Anunnaki left the surface, their infrastructure, their initial bases of operation, and their essential power sources might remain hidden, tucked away in inaccessible subterranean or aquatic locations, shielded from the wear and tear of human history. This leads to the uneasy speculation that perhaps the remnants of their technology, their me, the divine decrees and powers that govern civilization, are merely dormant, waiting for a specific cosmological alignment to reactivate their purpose. The heavy implication of this narrative is the burden of knowledge. Humanity was created with a mandate: toil and service. Our inherent ability to learn, to organize, to create complex social structures was merely a byproduct of being fashioned in the image of those who required organization, the Anunnaki. We were given consciousness, not for enlightenment, but for effective task management. The inherent tragedy in the Sumerian account is that while we gained the ability to question our existence, our origin story dictates a specific and limiting destiny. This knowledge, carried silently across millennia, acts as a subconscious anchor, explaining perhaps the deep, shared, and global sense of alienation we feel, the nagging feeling that our existence should amount to something more than consumption and labor. We are the consequence of a divine necessity, a solution to a logistical problem, forever seeking the meaning that was engineered out of us at the moment of our inception. Understanding this initial divine transaction, the trade of freedom for existence, labor for stability, is vital. If we were created for a specific task, what happens when that task is completed, or when the overseers return to check the progress of their grand experiment? We are not looking merely at ancient myths, but potentially at the foundational code of our reality. The Sumerian tablets, weathered by time and skepticism, refuse to let us dismiss this possibility entirely. They insist on the reality of the Anunnaki, on their labors, and on their decision to initiate the human project. They insist that the structure of the cosmos is one of surveillance and periodic review. And so, as we pull back from the intense scrutiny of the Lulu's origins, we are left staring at the looming horizon of return. If the Anunnaki left because their work was delegated, the assumption must be that they reserved the right of inspection. The entire cosmological clockwork, meticulously described by Sumerian astronomers, suggests specific dates and alignments that mark the end of cycles. Could the great anxiety woven into so many ancient prophecies, the fear of a catastrophic judgment, or a sudden change in global status, be nothing more than the anticipation of the Anunnaki's scheduled audit? This entire narrative, from the conflict of the primordial gods to the creation of the working man, forces us to question the nature of authority and the authenticity of our independence. The story is extensive, dense, and demands focused concentration. If you have followed the intricate threads of the Enuma Elish and the motivations of the Anunnaki up to this precise moment, if the weight of this ancient history is settling upon you, I invite you to pause and internalize this understanding. This journey into the Sumerian dawn requires shared reflection. Take a moment to articulate what aspect of the Anunnaki's engineering, their exhaustion, their ruthlessness, or their cosmic ambition, resonates most deeply with your own perception of reality. Let us continue this excavation together. Your engagement with these ideas ensures the narrative receives the serious consideration it deserves. If you feel compelled to support this deep investigation into the silent records of our past, please consider subscribing and liking this presentation, signaling your dedication to uncovering the suppressed history of our origins. The tablets still hold immense secrets regarding the mechanisms of the human assignment and what happened immediately after the Lulu began their endless toil. We have only just established the framework of our servitude. The next part of this investigation will reveal the specific nature of the golden burden the Anunnaki forced upon us and the true cost of our creation. We must look closely at the materials they sought and what that sought-after substance implies about their non-earthly requirements. We must accept that for the Sumerians, existence was a transaction, not a gift. Humanity's purpose was to serve as a biological machine, processing the needs of these interstellar visitors. The resources they extracted, the labor they required, it all points back to a necessity that was alien, vast, and non-negotiable. This required continuous energy, both physical and organizational. The records speak of the Igigi, the lower tier of the Anunnaki gods, who were themselves forced into hard labor before the creation of man, suggesting a rigid, hierarchical, and fiercely demanding system of resource management. When the Igigi rebelled against the pickaxe and the basket, the symbols of their earthly toil, it was a crisis that threatened to halt the entire operation. This rebellion of the mid-tier gods is the critical trigger for the invention of the Lulu. Ea, or Enki, the great schemer and progenitor of man, argued that the solution was not more enforcement, but better engineering. He recognized that a being created specifically for that environment, one who thrived on the resources available on Earth, could perform the necessary tasks without the same level of existential complaint that plagued the divine workers. This shift from divine labor to biological automation is perhaps the most advanced concept embedded in the entire Sumerian cosmological myth. It demonstrates a level of technological and biological proficiency that defies conventional archaeological dating. They weren't just building cities, they were building sustainable organic robots, beings capable of reproduction, self-maintenance, and, critically, suffering the exhaustion the gods sought to avoid. The tablets tell us that the process involved sophisticated methods of purification and refinement, conducted by the goddess Nintu, later known as Ninhursag, the Great Mother Goddess who acted as the chief geneticist. She received the blood of the sacrificed king, mixed it with the clay, and within the privacy of the House of Destiny, the first prototypes were molded. This blending was not accidental. It was a deliberate and calculated fusion of biological material. The human form was intentionally designed to resemble the Anunnaki, a detail often used to support the idea of genetic inheritance, but fundamentally limited in its longevity and inherent power, ensuring that the created workforce could never rise to challenge its creators. The entire enterprise was predicated on the understanding of planetary cycles and celestial mechanics. The Sumerians' obsession with astronomy was not simply intellectual curiosity. It was a necessary tool for survival and management, used to track the great cycles that governed the presence or absence of the Anunnaki. They knew that their overseers were linked to the cycles of a distant, unseen companion body in our solar system, perhaps one referenced heavily in other accounts. This cyclical connection meant that time on Earth was measured not just in days and years, but in epochs tied to the celestial mechanics of their distant home. The great structures they built, the ziggurats, the astronomical observatories, were perhaps designed as signaling beacons or repositories of knowledge, intended to survive the immense intervals between the high points of the Anunnaki's influence. We are left with the chilling suspicion that the great achievements of early civilization, agriculture, complex writing, jurisprudence, were merely tools given to humanity to make them more efficient servants. The gifts of civilization were simply the necessary operating instructions for the biological machines. If you have stayed with this detailed and continuous descent into the primary source material, you understand the magnitude of what we are examining. This is not history as taught. This is a hypothesis of origin that demands intellectual courage. If you feel the pull of this narrative, if you find yourself questioning the established consensus, then you are precisely where you need to be. To continue this investigation, to decode the next set of revelations regarding the specific substance the Anunnaki desired, the element that drove their 40-SAR labor cycle, we need your commitment. Please subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. Your engagement is the energy that drives this deep, meticulous exploration. If the notion of an engineered creation resonates with you, if you feel that our inherited history is incomplete, comment below with the phrase, "Echoes of Nibiru." Let us carry this burden of knowledge into the next stage, where we examine the true resource that powered the Anunnaki mission. Until then, keep questioning the quiet spaces in history. Did the architects, once the blueprint was secured and the foundational stones were laid, truly depart, or did they simply shift their focus to the subtle art of observation? This is the silent, pervasive question that lingers like the faint scent of ozone after a massive electrical storm. Whenever we delve into the heart of the Enuma Elish and the subsequent Sumerian narratives concerning the Anunnaki, we explored the chaos, the cosmic battle that rent Tiamat into the earth and the heavens, and the subsequent establishment of order by Marduk, or the corresponding dominant deity in that epoch. Yet, the creation myth, far from concluding with a universal sigh of relief, often pivots abruptly, exchanging the grandiose theater of cosmic genesis for the mundane urgency of immediate labor. Why were the superior entities, the beings of immense power, so quickly and severely exhausted by the mere act of maintaining the newly configured cosmos that they mandated the hurried creation of a subservient species? This is where the curiosity darkens into strangeness, where the comforting robe of mythology begins to feel suspiciously like a carefully tailored report. If we accept the premise that the Anunnaki were, as some interpretations suggest, high-level operatives arriving from a distant world, or perhaps another dimensional framework, the urgency of their material needs, namely the extraction of resources or the performance of physical labor, seems disproportionate to their technological prowess. Surely beings capable of manipulating planets and summoning storms of cosmic scale would not require crude shovels or manual excavation. Yet the texts are explicit. The Igigi, the lower tier of Anunnaki, grew weary of their duties and revolted, forcing the hand of the principal council to delegate the task of sustaining the infrastructure to a new construct, Lulu, the primitive worker, humanity itself. This sequence of events introduces a fundamental disconnect, a sudden, almost bureaucratic need for delegation following an event of divine magnitude. It suggests that their power was not boundless, or perhaps more chillingly, that the true purpose of their presence transcended the mere organizational task of setting stars in place, and was rooted firmly in the terrestrial and the exploitable. The uneasiness deepens when we consider the scope of their memory versus our own. For humanity, the passing of a century defines epochs, marks the collapse of empires, and pushes previous knowledge toward the brink of oblivion. But for the Anunnaki, whose recorded lifespans in the Sumerian king list stretch for tens of thousands of years, sometimes even hundreds of thousands for those pre-flood patriarchs, a human lifetime is less than a fleeting moment, a blink of an eye within their vast chronology. How can a civilization, engineered and governed by entities operating on such an immense timescale, truly value or even understand the chaotic short-term goals that define human society? They are observers of cycles, not participants in our fleeting dramas. Their perspective must be geologic, astronomical, viewing our history as a rapidly vibrating string that occasionally produces a momentary interesting tone. To truly grasp this inherent disparity is to understand the nature of our servitude, whether mythological or metaphorical. We are not just subjects. We are an investment, a genetic refinement designed to perform specific maintenance tasks during their prolonged absences. And this brings us to the crucial concept of the return. If their civilization revolves around the enormous orbital periods of their alleged homeworld, Nibiru, which requires vast millennia to complete its cycle, then their absence is merely the calculated interval between scheduled visits. This recognition shifts the narrative dramatically, transforming a simple creation myth into a detailed, albeit esoteric, astronomical and operational timetable. The Anunnaki did not simply disappear into the mythological mist. They adhered to a celestial appointment, leaving behind a complex machinery of civilization to self-sustain until the gravitational pull, the astronomical sign, announces their imminent approach once more. If this investigation, this quiet searching through the shattered tablets of the past, is resonating, if you feel that insistent tug of historical strangeness pulling you deeper into the archives of Sumer, I encourage you to pause, to process the sheer scale of time we are discussing. Engage with this exploration. Let us know in the comments if you sense the echo of this ancient cyclical rhythm, the anticipation of the observer's return. Your focused attention and participation are vital to illuminating these areas where history and deep mythology converge. Consider subscribing and liking the video now, allowing us to continue this careful, measured descent into the layers of our forgotten heritage. The whispers of the observing tower, however, never truly cease. Even when the majority of the Anunnaki withdrew, key figures remained, according to the texts. Enlil and Enki, the dominant sibling rivals, one associated with strict order and destiny, the other with creation, water, and knowledge, functioned less like distant gods and more like active site supervisors, or perhaps highly specialized geneticists monitoring their experiment. They were the intermediaries, the ones ensuring that humanity, the Lulu, adhered to the labor contract. This concept undermines the traditional theological idea of an omniscient, omnipresent deity. Instead, it paints a picture of hierarchical management, delegation, and specialized roles, a structure far more akin to an advanced multi-generational expedition than to spontaneous divine fiat. The Sumerian king list, which chronicles kings who reigned for impossibly long periods after the Great Flood, serves as an imperfect mirror reflecting this extraordinary lifespan disparity. Why did the reign suddenly and dramatically shorten after a certain point, transitioning from kings ruling for thousands of years to those ruling for decades? The standard academic explanation attributes this solely to mythologizing and political exaggeration. Yet through the lens of the Anunnaki narrative, the shift signifies the withdrawal of direct, long-lived management. It suggests a phase change, the transition from direct Anunnaki heritage or half-breed rulers to purely human governance, where the extended lifespan, perhaps a partial genetic inheritance, finally faded completely, leaving us with the brittle fragility of our modern existence. This transition marks the point where recognition solidifies into undeniable uneasiness. The realization that our current human timeline is simply the reduced model, the stabilized, maintenance-friendly version of a far grander, terrifyingly long-lived precursor civilization. This uncomfortable heritage is etched into the very foundations of Sumer. How did this civilization, seemingly birthed from the mud and reed huts, leap so rapidly into advanced mathematics, astronomy, complex legal systems, and sophisticated urban planning? The standard timeline struggles to account for the sudden sophistication, the intellectual explosion that defines the Uruk period. The Anunnaki narrative offers a provocative answer. They did not simply teach, they delegated a prepackaged knowledge system, a legacy of instruction designed to ensure the continuous upkeep of their earthly interests. It was not organic development, but rapid, enforced intellectual inheritance. The lingering question of absence then becomes critical. Why did they leave, even if cyclically? Perhaps the resources they sought were eventually harvested to a point of diminishing returns, or perhaps the climate and conditions on Earth, designed to be temporarily suitable for their needs, changed enough to necessitate a general withdrawal. More compellingly, some interpretations suggest the departure was driven by the political instability amongst the Anunnaki themselves, the interfactional conflicts detailed in various tablets. They withdrew to consolidate power, or perhaps to prepare for a necessary interstellar journey. Regardless of the immediate cause, the withdrawal left humanity standing alone, tasked with maintaining a complex system whose original architects vanished beyond the veil of our comprehension, only leaving behind the celestial signature, the expectation of their periodic return. This celestial signature is the core mechanism of the unsettling revelation. The Great Flood, the cataclysms, the shaping events of early human history are often described in conjunction with unusual astronomical phenomena. This reinforces the idea that the Anunnaki's presence, their schedule, and their interventions were fundamentally tied to the gravitational and orbital dance of their homeworld. The sign of their return is not a simple comet or a shooting star, but the convergence of vast, multi-millennial cycles, a harbinger etched into the very fabric of the sky, known only to those with the observational depth of thousands of years. We, in our short spans, have largely forgotten how to read the ancient astronomical warnings, relegating them to the realm of simple folklore. The echo of the return permeates every untouched Sumerian ziggurat, every cuneiform tablet hinting at sophisticated knowledge. These structures, built to reach the heavens, were not merely temples. They were arguably observation platforms, communication relays, or perhaps docking stations, literal terrestrial anchors built to withstand the oblivion of millennia, waiting for the necessary cyclical moment. It is this anticipation, this quiet dread embedded in the earliest human records, that keeps the investigation alive, compelling us to move into the next critical phase, the understanding of the initial pact, the contract established between the makers and the created. What exactly did humanity promise? And what are the implied consequences if that ancient covenant is somehow violated or forgotten? That is the essential mystery we must now unravel. If you have stayed with us through this deep dive into the cycles of observation and the unsettling heritage left by the Anunnaki, it means you recognize the profound importance of this investigation. We are attempting to piece together the fragments of a massive, deliberately obscured history. To ensure you do not miss the next crucial chapter, please take a moment now to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Your engagement is the fuel for this continued search. For those truly committed to this journey of discovery, comment below with the phrase, "The cycles of observation continue." Your comment serves as your intellectual marker, affirming your place among those who dare to question the linear narrative of history. Until our next session, remember that the past is never truly settled. It is merely waiting for the right moment to reveal itself once more. We will continue this exploration, delving deeper into the unspoken agreement that binds humanity to its ancient architects. What if the most profound aspects of reality are not hidden from us, but merely stretched across a temporal canvas so vast that our fleeting existence cannot perceive the edges? We have spoken of the chaotic waters, the division of Tiamat, and the establishment of order by Marduk, or perhaps, depending on the lens through which we view the tablets, by Enlil. Yet the story embedded in the cuneiform script does not merely detail an ancient struggle. It lays bare a deep structural difference in the perception of time itself, a difference that generates a profound sense of estrangement the moment we truly grasp it. The Sumerian king lists, those unsettling catalogues of rulership that often appear alongside the cosmological narratives, present figures whose reigns lasted for tens of thousands of years. Before the Great Flood, the deluge that wiped the slate clean, kings are catalogued as ruling for periods that defy geological epochs, not just human lifespans. Allegedly, Alulim, the first king of Eridu, ruled for 49,000 years. Uruk, another, is credited with 36,000. We are compelled to ask, are these numbers merely mythic inflation, a poetic expression of antiquity, or do they represent a sober record based on the lifespan and cycle of the beings to whom these kings owed fealty, the Anunnaki themselves? If the primary architects of civilization possessed life cycles measured not in decades, but in the orbits of vast, distant celestial bodies, then their sense of urgency, their motivations, and their ultimate goals would operate on a scale incomprehensible to our brief, fragile lives. This recognition introduces a chilling intellectual dissonance. We are participants in a history whose true clock operates on a speed we cannot register. We observe events, the rise of cities, the invention of writing, as crucial milestones, while for the original observers, these events might be nothing more than the daily maintenance checks on a complex, generations-spanning experiment. This overwhelming temporal gap forces us to reconsider the nature of the transaction that created us, the Lulu Amelu, the primitive worker. We must hold these staggering durations in our minds because they dictate the rhythm of the entire Sumerian cosmological narrative, and if we allow ourselves to truly absorb the implications of such longevity, the entire focus shifts. It is a quiet but relentless reshaping of our understanding, inviting us deeper into this mystery. If you find yourself grappling with the sheer scale of time we are discussing, feeling that strange intellectual vertigo, please consider sharing your thoughts on the temporal paradox in the comments below. Your input helps guide this collective investigation, extending the conversation beyond these simple frames. This brings us to the missing interlude, the vast chasm of memory that separates the pre-Diluvian world from the post-Diluvian resurgence. What happened during the immense reigns of those kings that required such a sudden, cataclysmic reset? The records, though detailed in their cosmology, become strangely quiet concerning the intervening history immediately following the Great Flood. There is a sense of trauma, a systemic amnesia imposed upon the survivors. The Anunnaki, specifically Enlil and Enki, reappear to reorganize humanity, but they do so amidst the rubble of a forgotten age. This absence of clear continuity suggests a deliberate filtering process, a strategic omission. Perhaps the knowledge held by those antediluvian kings was too disruptive, too powerful. Or perhaps the truth about the Anunnaki's intervention during that first iteration was something they preferred to bury beneath the mud and silt of the global flood narrative. The true horror of the deluge, therefore, may not have been just the water, but the enforced societal memory wipe that followed, setting humanity back to a state of dependency and relative ignorance, ready to serve the next phase of the grand experiment. The burden of the material, as dictated by the tablets, defines our creation. The Enuma Elish implies that the need for labor was paramount. The Igigi, the lower tier of Anunnaki who were tasked with infrastructure work, revolted. Tired of the shovel and the basket, they threw down their tools and demanded a substitute. This is the moment where the Anunnaki transitioned from cosmic architects to genetic engineers, mixing the clay of the earth with the blood or essence of a fallen deity, sometimes Chingu, sometimes other rebellious figures, to create humankind. The Lulu were engineered not for worship or spiritual enlightenment, but for practical material service, digging canals, mining precious resources, and maintaining the infrastructure required by their creators. This utilitarian genesis is profoundly unsettling. It suggests that our intellectual and emotional complexity, our capacity for art, philosophy, and self-awareness, might be merely the unintended byproducts of a sophisticated labor solution. We are, in this telling, highly efficient tools that developed consciousness, complicating the very task for which we were designed. This mechanical view of creation forces us to confront the cycle of the observer. If the Anunnaki were seeking specific materials, traditionally gold or other heavy elements crucial for their homeworld's atmosphere or protection, then their entire interaction with Earth becomes a focused, resource-driven mission. They are not merely gods, but sophisticated prospectors and engineers. They established cities, developed complex agriculture, and implemented sophisticated astronomy not out of divine benevolence, but to ensure the efficient operation of their primary goal. The human element, the Lulu, was simply part of the infrastructure. The Anunnaki became the silent observers, watching their engineered species multiply, diversify, and perform the necessary labor, retreating to the background only when the initial workload was complete and the human systems were self-sustaining. This narrative paints them less as deities concerned with moral conduct and more as high-level research staff monitoring a long-term bioengineering project. The tablets speak of their meticulous records, their precision in calculating celestial alignments, evidence of a scientific, almost clinical approach to Earth. And it is this precision that links directly to celestial mechanics and return. The Sumerian accounts and interpretations suggest that the Anunnaki's physical presence on Earth was governed by the long, elliptical orbit of a distinct celestial body, often hypothesized as the 12th planet, or Nibiru. If their return is predictable, timed to this vast orbit which allegedly takes thousands of Earth years to complete, then the entire span of known human history, from the rise of Sumer to the present day, might represent only a small fraction of the time between their major cycles of intervention. This predictability is the foundation of their power and their apparent apathy towards the smaller concerns of humanity. They depart, confident that the experiment will continue and that they will return when the orbital mechanics dictate it. The unease stemming from this idea is palpable. Are we simply waiting for a scheduled reappearance, a cyclical accounting? And if so, what signal will herald their return, and what condition will they expect to find their creation in? Consider the weight of inherited knowledge. Sumer appeared, seemingly fully formed. Mathematics, complex astronomical charting, ziggurat construction, and a sophisticated writing system emerged almost instantaneously, without the slow, arduous, gradual development observed in other early cultures. Could this leap not be attributed to genius, but to a transfer? The idea that civilization was kick-started, seeded with the necessary tools for self-management and resource extraction, is a recurring theme when examining the initial perfection of Sumerian technology. This granted knowledge serves as a persistent, unsettling marker. It suggests that the Lulu were fast-tracked, given just enough information to fulfill their primary function. But the inherent danger in giving consciousness a toolbox is that it may eventually figure out how to use those tools to investigate the origin of the tools themselves, a scenario which surely presents a potential systemic risk to the observing Anunnaki. This realization leads inevitably to the Great Amnesia. Why do subsequent mythologies, Akkadian, Babylonian, which canonized Marduk's dominance, and eventually Hebraic, systematically minimize or distort the roles of the original figures like Enlil and Enki? Enlil, the commander, and Enki, the geneticist, benefactor, become marginalized, their complex roles flattened into archetypes or absorbed into later singular deities. Was this historical dilution an accident of translation, or a necessary political and theological maneuver to erase the disruptive truth of humanity's engineered origin? The shift in focus away from the multiple Anunnaki toward a singular, transcendent creator might be evidence of a deliberate campaign of forgetfulness, designed to make the original, tangible, material creation story seem too primitive, too crude for later, sophisticated belief systems. To forget the Anunnaki is to forget the chain of command, thereby granting humanity the illusion of true autonomy. But perhaps they left a sign of the Watchers. Given their advanced knowledge and their perceived reliance on predictable astronomical cycles, it is logical to assume they would leave markers, celestial, geological, or technological, to signal their location and condition upon their scheduled return. These might not be grand monuments, but subtle coded anomalies embedded in the Earth's crust or locked within the very mathematical and mythological structures they helped instill. The pervasive, global obsession with astronomical measurement, the alignment of ancient structures with distant star systems, might not be an attempt to worship the heavens, but rather an ongoing, unconscious effort by humanity to read the quiet signals left behind by the departing observers, a biological instinct to look for the master's return ticket. This shifts our perception into a different dimension of time. If 1,000 human years is, to them, perhaps less than a month in their operational cycle, then the vast epochs of prehistory are not empty voids, but busy periods of their civilization. Their visits are our eras. Their brief moments of intervention define the trajectory of centuries for us. This immense disparity in temporal perception highlights the impossibility of true mutual understanding. When they return, will they even register the difference between the Roman Empire and the digital age? Or will they simply see the long, continuous curve of an ongoing, managed population, ready for the next phase of labor or resource extraction? It is a deeply humbling, almost terrifying thought that our glorious, self-defined epochs might be mere blips in a management report written in cuneiform. We stand now at the precipice of understanding the implications of these cycles, recognizing the inherent instability and potential conflict built into our very design. The core of the Sumerian narrative is not just about a beginning, but about continuity and recurrence. The texts hint darkly at future struggles, at the inherent jealousy between Enlil and Enki, and the ultimate destiny of the created being. The loom of the horizon is approaching, suggesting the next stage of the investigation must focus on the end of the current cycle. If you have followed this dense and winding path of inquiry, grappling with the strange scale of Anunnaki time and the utilitarian nature of our genesis, you are an essential part of this exploration. To secure your place as a dedicated observer of these forgotten histories, please consider subscribing to the channel now. And if this deep dive into the cyclical nature of creation resonated with you, show your support by liking this video. For those who have absorbed the profound unease of this temporal disparity, type the phrase, "The Watchers are scheduled," in the comments. We must prepare ourselves, for the next part of our journey will lead us directly to the signs and warnings embedded in the ancient texts regarding the potential consequences of the Anunnaki's inevitable return. Is it possible that the deepest and most profound truths about our existence are not locked away in inaccessible cosmic vaults, but hidden in plain sight, encoded in the foundational narratives we dismiss as mere mythology? We have journeyed deep into the cuneiform tablets, meticulously piecing together the fragmented history of the Enuma Elish, the chaotic, brutal birth of our cosmos, culminating in the ascendancy of Marduk and the subsequent blueprint for creation. Yet, as we analyze the intent behind the creation narrative, a profound estrangement begins to set in. The Sumerian accounts, far from portraying a benevolent, omniscient creator who shaped humanity out of boundless love, describe a process born of necessity, resource depletion, and divine conflict. We recognize the narrative, but the implications still feel alien, unsettlingly pragmatic. Why would the most powerful beings in the known universe, the Anunnaki, require manual labor? The answer, inscribed on those ancient cylinders, strips away the comfortable theological cushioning we have built over millennia. They needed slaves. They needed the Lulu, the primitive worker, to take over the arduous task of mining the necessary minerals, purportedly gold, required for the sustenance of their distant home world. This recognition introduces an epistemological rift, forcing us to separate the beautiful poetry of ancient worship from the cold, hard logistical records of an advanced, extraterrestrial civilization operating under desperate circumstances. The world was not made for us. We were made for the world, or rather, for the immediate and demanding needs of others. The unsettling realization that our genesis was a highly sophisticated engineering solution rather than an act of pure grace changes everything about how we view the historical trajectory of human civilization. We are in essence the result of a divine intervention that was fundamentally self-serving, designed to solve a critical labor crisis among the high gods. The deeper we penetrate this concept of divine pragmatism, the more acute the uneasiness becomes. If the Anunnaki are the architects of our physical and potentially genetic structure, then our inherent flaws, our short lifespans relative to their own, and our built-in capacity for conflict could be interpreted not as consequences of a fall, but as design features. Why grant permanence to a temporary workforce? The Sumerian texts speak of the initial humans failing to reproduce effectively, requiring further genetic modification. a clear indication that the creation process was experimental, iterative, and imperfect, a prototype, not a finished masterpiece. This continual tweaking of the Lulu raises the inevitable, haunting question that lingers across all archaeological sites. Are we truly independent, or are we merely systems running on legacy code, waiting for the next update, or perhaps the next inspection? This realization demands careful, measured contemplation, pushing the boundaries of what history is willing to accept. If this journey of deconstruction resonates with your own innate curiosity, if you feel the weight of this forgotten history pressing upon you, then engage with this investigation fully. Take a moment now to ensure you are subscribed and that you have pressed the like button, not simply as a transactional gesture, but as an acknowledgement of the seriousness of this shared intellectual endeavor. By commenting below with your immediate thoughts on the nature of the Lulu's creation, you extend this inquiry, allowing us to pool our collective recognition of this profound, uncomfortable truth. The echo of the primordial battle continues to reverberate, long after Tiamat was cleaved and her body formed the heavens and the earth. That mythological conflict, so easily categorized as a symbolic struggle between chaos and order, might instead represent a monumental physical event, the arrival of a celestial body and the subsequent catastrophic shaping of our solar system. The Anunnaki arrived not just as rulers, but as survivors, carrying the scars of interstellar war and the burden of maintaining their lineage and technology far from home. Their necessity for gold, often dismissed as esoteric fancy, takes on a stark scientific weight if considered as a requirement for atmospheric shielding or critical technological functions on a planetary scale. This cyclical need, the raison d'être for the Human Creation Project, establishes a dependency loop that defines our civilization's history. We were created to serve a specific industrial function, a dependency that stretches across vast cosmic cycles. This leads us to the unsettling hypothesis of the cycles of dependency. If the Anunnaki left, as the tablets suggest, what was the duration of their absence? Was it a permanent departure or merely a strategic withdrawal corresponding to astronomical alignments or the necessity of resource consolidation? Ancient narratives across cultures, from the Sumerian king list to the Mesoamerican calendars, are saturated with the concept of long, predictable cycles, ages that begin and end with cataclysms and the reappearance of gods or watchers. The departure, therefore, was not a conclusion, but an intermission. We, their creations, were left to maintain the civilization they built, a holding pattern for a return that was always anticipated. This maintenance period is marked by the silent observation post. If the creators withdrew physically, they did not necessarily abandon surveillance. The tales of the Watchers, Igigi, who interacted more directly with humanity, sometimes disobeying the primary Anunnaki directives, hint at a residual presence, a monitoring system put in place to oversee the continued operations and the eventual rise in self-management of the Lulu. Even now, the palpable absence of definitive proof, coupled with the persistent pattern of advanced knowledge appearing suddenly in Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, suggests continuous, if subtle, guidance. We must ask, were the great leaps in Sumerian mathematics, astronomy, and organization truly spontaneous developments of primitive minds, or were they measured doses of inherited knowledge, strategically released to ensure the civilization remained viable until the next celestial alignment? The implication of managed information brings us directly to the Great Forgetting. As successor civilizations arose, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the original raw Sumerian narratives underwent significant theological editing. Marduk's role was inflated, Tiamat's was demonized, and the explicit labor crisis that necessitated human creation was softened or outright obscured by the veneer of moralistic creation myths. This intentional blurring, this systemic suppression of the original context, serves as a powerful mechanism of control. By altering the narrative, the subsequent generations were divorced from the true, uncomfortable origins of their species, replacing the truth of genetic engineering with the comfort of theological destiny. This manufactured amnesia ensures that when the cyclical return occurs, the modern Lulu will greet the returning figures as gods, saviors, or benevolent extraterrestrials, rather than as the original project managers reclaiming their assets. This calculated pattern is tied intrinsically to the celestial clockwork. The ancient Sumerians possessed an astronomical knowledge far beyond what should have been possible for a civilization relying on naked eye observation. Their precise reckoning of planetary movements and orbital periods hints at inherited data, perhaps tied to the orbital cycle of a specific celestial body, a wandering planet, often associated with the Anunnaki, that dictates the rhythm of their interaction with Earth. This cosmic schedule implies that the periods of human independence are merely intervals dictated by physics, not by divine choice. The cyclical return is not a prophecy, it is a trajectory. The anxiety embedded in the ancient texts about the end of ages and the return of the cosmic lords takes on a terrifying precision when viewed through the lens of calculated orbital mechanics. If you find yourself tracing these historical and astronomical parallels, perhaps comment with the phrase, "The cycle returns," signaling your deeper recognition of this underlying pattern. The shadow of the double helix underlies the entire creation project. The texts suggest that the human form was achieved through the mingling of the essence of the Anunnaki with the existing primitive hominids of Earth. This genetic fusion is the ultimate key to our enduring enigma. What percentage of our DNA carries the signature of the architects? And more crucially, what mechanisms were embedded within that structure? Are there dormant genetic markers that could be activated by specific environmental changes, or perhaps by the proximity of the returning planet itself? We are left to ponder whether our innate drive for exploration, our rapid technological advancement, and our self-destructive tendencies are all expressions of an inherited, highly advanced, yet potentially unstable genetic blueprint. We approach the precipice of understanding, where the narrative of the Enuma Elish transitions from describing creation to issuing the final warning in the clay. The ultimate message left by Enki and the surviving sages of Sumer was not merely a record of past events, but a set of highly detailed instructions and warnings for the cycles yet to come. The enduring complexity of the cuneiform tablets, surviving catastrophic floods and millennia of conflict, suggests that this information was intended to endure the Great Forgetting. It is a time capsule, designed to be read when humanity reached a stage of technological maturity, capable of understanding its own origin and the trajectory of its creators. The warning is subtle. Prepare for the resumption of the project. We stand now at the threshold of the final phase of this investigation, staring directly into the unsettling truth of our origins and the implied future. If the narrative we have followed is even partially correct, if we are the engineered temporary solution to a celestial labor crisis, then the implications for our present reality are staggering, forcing us to question every accepted historical and theological framework. If you have stayed with this complex and often uncomfortable investigation, absorbing the intricate details of the Sumerian cosmology and the practical motives of the Anunnaki, then you are part of a select few who truly grasp the gravity of this forgotten history. This quest requires dedication, a willingness to challenge established truths, and an understanding that the most important stories are often the most heavily suppressed. If you recognize the importance of unearthing these profound historical secrets, please ensure you are subscribed to the channel now and affirm your engagement by leaving a like on this video. To mark your journey through this crucial stage of recognition, please comment below with the specific phrase, "The Architect's Design." Your participation fuels the continuation of this research. We are not yet finished. The next chapter will focus entirely on the imminent implications of the Anunnaki's potential return and the culmination of the Sumerian prophecy. Do not miss the final part of this series, which will appear on your screen now as we conclude our investigation into the origins of creation. What if the greatest lie wasn't what we were told about our origins, but what we were made to forget about our masters? For centuries, we have treated the Enuma Elish and the scattered fragments concerning the Anunnaki as archaic, beautiful, but fundamentally irrelevant mythology, a poetic struggle between primordial chaos and ordered divinity. But as we pull back the veil, layer by layer, synthesizing the cuneiform accounts with the relentless march of astronomical and geological time, a chilling recognition begins to dawn. This isn't merely a creation story. It might be an operational manual, a testament to a grand, unsettling experiment initiated and managed by entities whose motives remain profoundly alien to our modern sensibilities. The journey we have taken, from the churning abyss of Tiamat to the engineered emergence of Lulu Amalu, the primitive worker, concludes not with a tidy historical footnote, but with a lingering, unresolved question about sovereignty. We have spent ample time tracing the lineage of gods, Anu, Enlil, Enki, Ishtar, understanding their rivalries and their roles in shaping the Mesopotamian landscape. Yet, their most lasting legacy is not the great ziggurat they commanded to be built, but the very nature of human consciousness, molded and accelerated for a specific, seemingly utilitarian purpose. When the tablets speak of the Anunnaki retiring, of delegating authority to human kings, and ascending back into the heavens, it creates a sense of closure that is deeply misleading. Their departure was never characterized in Sumerian literature as a permanent abdication, but rather as an intermission, a necessary alignment dictated by celestial mechanics far exceeding the scope of earthbound calendars. The quiet of history, the millennia of human self-governance, may have simply been the duration of a cosmic orbit, a waiting period until the cyclical return of the great celestial body associated with their passage, the body that anchored their ability to sustain operations here. This brings us to the profound, unsettling weight of forgetfulness, the first true act of narrative manipulation. How quickly can a species forget the circumstances of its own birth when those circumstances involved literal servitude to towering, technologically advanced progenitors? The destruction of libraries, the rewriting of sacred texts by subsequent, conquering empires, the slow erosion caused by time and climate, all contributed to the obfuscation. But perhaps the most effective method of control was simply the passage of time itself, the stretching of the gap until the events became indistinguishable from fable. We are left only with the metallic taste of inherited knowledge, a sudden, inexplicable leap in civilization that defies conventional evolutionary models. This strange acceleration, the simultaneous emergence of complex mathematics, astronomy, urban planning, and codified law in Sumer, suggests not gradual development, but rather the rapid deployment of a pre-existing package, a societal starter kit left behind by the architects. If these echoes resonate deep within you, if this journey into the dust of Sumer has rearranged the foundations of your understanding, prompting a reevaluation of everything you thought you knew about the dawn of humanity, then pause. Take a moment to acknowledge the weight of these ideas, perhaps sharing a thought below so we might map this hidden terrain together. This shared reflection solidifies the path, transforming isolated curiosity into collective recognition. If you find value in these relentless inquiries into the deepest mysteries of our past, consider lending your support by liking this video and subscribing, ensuring you remain connected as we continue to sift through the dust for the final, definitive signs of these ancient observers. The structure of the Enuma Elish, when stripped of its religious veneer, outlines a geopolitical conflict over Earth's resources and position, culminating in the creation of humanity as a solution to a labor crisis. The creation of the Lulu was not an act of divine benevolence, but a surgical intervention, a genetic hybridization designed for durability and compliance. This recognition forces us to re-examine our own place in the universe. Are we the pinnacle of creation, or merely successful, self-replicating tools? The Sumerians, who lived closest to this event horizon, certainly seemed to harbor a deep-seated awareness of their subservient position, constantly monitoring the skies for omens, performing rituals not out of devotion alone, but out of a profound sense of obligation to the entities who held the ultimate blueprint. The echo of the tablets refuses to be silenced. Every translation of the primary texts reinforces the strangeness, the highly descriptive language concerning travel between worlds, the forging of metallic tools, the deliberate mixing of god blood, DNA, with terrestrial materials, clay, hominid cells. This is not the language of metaphorical theology. It is the language of advanced biological and physical engineering. We are recognizing the handiwork of the architects, realizing that the chaotic cosmic battle detailed in the beginning of the Enuma Elish was merely the pretext for the establishment of a planetary mining colony, Earth, designed to serve the needs of a civilization beyond our solar system. The inevitability of cycles is perhaps the most frightening conclusion extracted from the Sumerian cosmology. Their entire understanding of time and fate was cyclical, bound not by linear progression, but by the elliptical orbit of the great planet, Nibiru, often called the planet of the crossing. If the Anunnaki's initial arrival and subsequent departure were dictated by the periodicity of this vast orbit, then their eventual return is not a matter of prophecy or mystical speculation, but a matter of astronomical certainty. The Sumerians maintained meticulous records, not just of celestial bodies, but of specific orbital periods, understood through the lens of observing forces far grander than those governing the local planets. This understanding implies a countdown, a celestial clockwork winding toward an appointed hour when the conditions that allowed their first prolonged stay will once again align. What happened to the stolen blueprint? When the Anunnaki supposedly left, they didn't erase the evidence. They simply left the infrastructure running. We inherited cities, specialized knowledge, and a hierarchical societal structure that mirrored their own. But the key to their technology, the true secrets of cosmic travel and resource manipulation, were sealed away or deliberately destroyed. We were left with the ability to manage the farm, but denied the capacity to leave the fence. Our history is marked by the recurring search for lost artifacts, hidden knowledge, and texts that might bridge the immense technological gap between primitive humanity and the founders of Sumer. This search, often relegated to the fringe, is perhaps the most profound human quest, the attempt to recover our full, unedited birthright, hidden somewhere in the deepest recesses of the collective unconscious. The Watcher's vigil is the unsettling reality of the present. Are we truly alone, having shaken off the yoke of our creators? Or have the Anunnaki merely transitioned to a different form of supervision? The texts speak of those who remained behind, the Igigi, the observers who perhaps found a kinship with the terrestrial environment, or who were tasked with maintaining the delicate balance of the engineered species. If our creators possess technology capable of manipulating genetics and planetary orbits, then surveillance requires no physical presence on Earth. We might be living in a carefully monitored system, where our social, technological, and potentially even genetic evolution is observed and perhaps subtly guided by remote parameters, ensuring that the experiment does not fail and that the resource, human labor and creativity, remains viable for the great return. The final sign will not be delivered via a celestial trumpet blast, but perhaps through the slow, undeniable accumulation of geophysical and astronomical anomalies. If the return of the progenitor world is tied to specific gravitational perturbations, then we must look for the subtle destabilization of the outer solar system, the signs of a massive dark body influencing established orbits. This impending reappearance is the true climax of the Anunnaki narrative. It provides a temporal framework for the Sumerian fear and reverence, a dread born of knowing that the masters who created them for servitude would eventually return to assess their assets. Ask yourself, if the creators return, will they find us worthy of promotion or simply ready for re-optimization? If you are tracking this journey, comment below with the word return, a quiet acknowledgement of this cyclical inevitability. The Great Return, according to the deep mythos, is the moment of judgment and realignment. It is when the cosmological forces that initially drove the Anunnaki to Earth for gold once again necessitate their presence. This event doesn't just promise upheaval, it promises a complete redefinition of reality. If our civilization is merely a temporary phase of autonomy permitted during their absence, then the return of the architects signifies the end of the human age as we understand it. It is the closing of the probationary period, the moment the tenants must vacate or submit to a new lease agreement dictated by the original owners. This realization casts the entire sweep of human history, from the rise of empires to our current technological age, as merely a blink of an eye within the vast, cold clockwork of interstellar time. The question of readiness is fundamentally a philosophical one. Are we, the progeny of the primitive worker, sufficiently evolved to negotiate our freedom? Or have we become so addicted to the comfortable narratives of independence that we have forgotten the true nature of our debt? The legacy of the Enuma Elish is the profound psychological scarring left by the knowledge that we were made, not born of intrinsic cosmic necessity, but fashioned from need. To face the Anunnaki, should they return, would require a unified global consciousness ready to assert a sovereignty that we have yet to prove even among ourselves. We must decide if the final act of this millennia-long story will be one of defiant independence or resigned submission. This journey, traversing the deepest recesses of Sumerian lore, concludes here, not with an answer, but with an echo that demands vigilant observation. The tablets have been read, the clues assembled, and the structure of our creation stands revealed. A meticulously planned intervention. The story of the Enuma Elish is not merely ancient history, it is a cosmic preface, the prologue to a return yet to be written. The narrative remains unfinished, stretching out into the darkness of the cosmos, waiting for the celestial body to complete its grand loop. If you have navigated this extensive investigation, absorbing the intricate relationship between the Enuma Elish and the unsettling claims of the Anunnaki, you have demonstrated a profound commitment to understanding the hidden truths of our world. To anchor this journey and become part of this ongoing exploration, I ask you to join our community by subscribing to the channel. Please click the like button to signal the importance of this deep research. And if this entire narrative has resonated with the deepest part of your intellectual curiosity, make your mark. Comment the phrase, "Precisely. The dust remembers." Stay vigilant, stay curious, and continue this exploration into the shadows of our beginning by following the next chapter appearing on your screen now. The greatest secrets are not hidden, they are merely waiting to be recognized.